Hi, my name is Dr. Douglas Owens. I teach multiple woodwinds at Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado. Congratulations on choosing oboe as your instrument. I think you're going to find it both a very challenging and a very rewarding experience. I find oboe to be one of the most challenging instruments because of a couple of aspects. Number one, you get to play wonderful, wonderful melodies on the oboe. You're almost like a singer being showcased with a band when you have a solo. Not only that, but you have very challenging technical lines. That is to say, you have a lot of notes to learn on the oboe. So, like I said, you must be up for a challenge. And again, congratulations on choosing oboe. Hey again. So we're going to talk about putting the oboe together right now. The first thing that I would actually suggest when you're putting the oboe together has nothing to do with the instrument itself, but with the reed. What I would do, if I were you, is get a little cup of water and go ahead and put your reed in before you start putting the instrument together. Now there's a reason for that. Reeds generally take about 2.5 to 3 minutes, depending on your climate, depending on the humidity of wherever you live, to soak up, to be used on the oboe properly. We're going to talk about that in a later chapter. So go ahead and put your oboe reed in the water. Now we're going to actually talk about putting the oboe together while the reed hydrates, soaks up a little bit. Now this is my oboe case right here. The oboe case has a top end and a bottom end. Be really careful when you're opening the case, especially the first couple of times. If you open it the wrong way, your oboe may spill out onto the floor and you may have to take it into the repair shop, and I know your mom and dad don't want to do that. Right here, I have a piece of white tape on the top of my oboe case. This shows me the proper end. If you look at the case, there's actually a thinner end and a fatter end. This fatter end actually houses the instrument. The thinner end is the top of the case. So what we do, again, making sure that we're looking at the top part of the case, is we open the case up. There we go. Oboe's in there, opened it the right way, no oboe on the floor. Great. Now, there are a couple things I need to talk about even before we start talking about putting the oboe together actually. If you look at the ends of the two longest joints, right here you see this is cork. This is cork. And you need to keep that cork pretty well lubricated, because what's going to end up happening is this cork is going to slide in and out and in and out and in and out. Hopefully a lot of times as you practice and as you play in band or in orchestra of these other joints, if you keep it lubricated with cork grease, you should have a little thing of cork grease in your case. If you keep it properly lubricated, then the cork is going to be able to be sustained longer. Now, if you don't keep it lubricated the right way, what may happen is the cork may tear, may rip and may tear. And again, you may be having to take another trip to the repair store. Couple of steps that we want to take. The first thing that we want to do is we want to take out our bell joint. This is the bottom joint of the instrument. My particular oboe has what's known as a low B flat. This low B flat may or may not be on your horn, depending on the quality. But if you do have a low B flat, make sure that you're pressing this key right here down. What that does is it raises this right here. Then you take out the next joint, which is the bottom joint. With this pressed, line these bridge keys up. If you line them up just so, then you should have an assembly like this. Now the reason that pressing this down is so important is if I don't, what may happen is I may end up scraping these two keys together, and again, we don't want to do that. So right now, keeping this pressed, I've got this lined up. The next section, the top joint of the oboe, we again make sure that these bridge keys are going in the right way. Now, if you look at both sides of the oboe, these keys on the bottom joint go under the keys on the top joint. And be really careful about this because they have to line up really well, and if they scrape together, then you can cause some damage to the instrument. Let me show you what not to do while you're putting these two joints together. Make sure that you're not pressing this top key on the bottom joint. What this key does is raises this. If this bridge key is raised, then it's going to scrape into this. As well, make sure you're not hitting this little longish key right here either, because as well, this is going to raise and it may cause some damage. So as you're putting it together, again, make sure you're not touching anything here and make sure that the keys are sliding in the right way. Now, if you look, I have these bridge keys, both sets of bridge keys lined up perfectly together. And again, this is really important because the oboe is not going to play exactly right if they aren't lined up. So all that to say now, the oboe is together. The oboe is put together perfectly well. Now that you've spent a lot of time being really careful about putting your oboe together, you can put your reed on. This part of the oboe reed right here, many people use cork. I have little rubber bumpers on this that kind of serve the same purpose as the cork does. Don't hold the reed up here and try to squeeze it in. You may do damage to the tip of the reed. I hold my oboe reeds a little further down, actually on the string when I'm putting them in. And that way I'm not risking damaging the tip or anything. But now we have a ready-to-play, fully assembled oboe. Now, just to give you a little bit of background on why posture is important, think about your body, think about your respiratory system as a garden hose. If it's bunched up at all, or if there's any obstruction, the water's not going to flow properly, right? The trachea or the windpipe is a lot like that. So let me show you what I consider to be proper posture. If you think about it, everything in my torso is lined up. If I'm slouched forward, I've got a little bit of bend in my windpipe. If I'm laid back, I've got a little bit of bend in my windpipe. So, feet flat on the floor and straight up posture with your torso, which allows air to get down the windpipe efficiently. Now, breathing. Two aspects of breathing that I want to address with you. The first of which being how we take in air in the first place. Well, think about it. How do you do it? Mouth or nose? Let me show you something. Which do you think I'm going to intake more air with? Or try it yourself, and I bet you will find that breathing with your mouth, you bring a lot more air and a lot more oxygen into your system. Now, the next thing I want to talk about as far as breathing is this. Is shallow breathing versus deep breathing. Let me show you shallow breathing first. I bet you've probably done this because I know I have, and I bet you can look around your band or your orchestra wind section and see people doing this. What raised? My shoulders. My shoulders raised. That's kind of a lot of tension right there in my shoulders. What that's also doing is contracting my lungs. My lungs aren't able to expand to be filled with air like they need to be filled. Now let me show you what deep breathing is. My shoulders didn't move at all. Let me show you though what did. I had a band director show me this trick one time. He said for me to put my fingers on my stomach like this and breathe in. You see my fingers moving apart? The reason that is my lungs are expanding, or they're filling to their maximum capacity. Your band director's probably used the word diaphragm before, right? If he or she hasn't, They will in the very near future. But my diaphragm is moving down because my lungs are expanding so fully. Those are my two pieces of advice on breathing. Let's talk a little bit about finger placement and hand position on the oboe. Now, the first most important thing about playing the oboe is how you're going to support the instrument. Well, there are a couple of pivot points of support, the most important being the thumb rest. If you can see where my thumb is on the thumb rest, this is supporting the bulk of the weight of the instrument. Going through the very basic positions of the fingers, we use, on a most basic level, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Index, middle, and ring finger on both right and left hands. On the left hand, the index finger, finger 1, goes here on the first tone hole. Second finger, middle finger here, third finger here. On the right hand, first finger here, second finger here, third finger here. Now, we haven't talked about the pinkies yet. The pinkies on many woodwinds, especially on oboe, have pretty tall orders. In the right hand, the right pinky has 3 keys to hit. Now, these are mostly for low notes, for the lowest notes on the horn. There's one that we'll talk about in a few moments, though, but mostly for the low notes of the horn. Again, one of the first things I said is keep those fingers as close to these pads and tone holes as you possibly can. The left pinky has as many as 5 keys to hit. And again, you don't have to have the left pinky down, but you do want to have this pinky as close as possible. Now let's talk about what's going on in the left thumb. I've already talked about the right thumb being very supportive of the weight of the oboe. The left thumb hits what's known as the first octave key. What you're going to find is notes above the treble clef staff, or at the very top of it, start using this. We'll get to some of those on this video. The second octave key is right here, and it is actually used or triggered by the first index finger, the side of the index finger. This motion right here. So those are the very basics of oboe fingering and hand position. Let's talk about making those first sounds on the oboe. Anybody who's ever played the instrument knows that this can be a really, really cool experience. But you want to do it the right way, because if you don't, it might not sound as cool as I know that you can make it sound. Now, before we even do anything with the oboe itself, let's talk about a few basics. Let's talk about the embouchure, mouth muscles, how the mouth muscles are going to control an instrument. On every wind instrument, there's a factor of the embouchure, and oboe has a very specific embouchure that you have to learn. First of all, I suggest starting by making an ooh sound. Ooh. Okay. See how my lips kind of puckered out a little bit? Ooh. Now, there's a little more to it than that. What I want you to focus on when you're making this oboe embouchure is not only sticking these lips out, but maintaining control, an equal level of control around all your mouth muscles. Your band director, especially to the clarinet section, might talk about the corners of the embouchure. Well, the corners come into play on the oboe embouchure as well, but everything around here equal. So not a ooh, a loose ooh, but ooh, ooh. Now take out your oboe reed that's been soaking for 2 or 3 minutes. I want you to think about sticking that oboe reed into that ooh embouchure and rolling in with the lips just a little bit. By rolling in, I mean just a minute difference. So if your reed sounds something like that, then you're in good shape to stick it on the oboe. But let me go ahead and put the oboe reed on the oboe. Now, what I'm about to play for you is not a real note on the oboe. I'm not going to put down any fingers to make any kind of real fingering. But again, I am going to use my thumb to support the weight of the instrument. That's very, very, very important. So again, ooh embouchure, rolling the oboe in just a little bit. Let me show you another couple aspects about the position of the instrument. I talked about posture earlier, but there are a couple of aspects of the position of the oboe and the oboe reed in your mouth that I think are very important. When I play the oboe with a more downward angle of the reed in the mouth and of the instrument. I'm going to stick the oboe a little more forward. And I want you to listen to how the tone changes. If I stick it too forward, it gets bright and nasty, right? If you are angling the oboe at a closer angle to your body, it makes the sound darker. That is to say, what we're more used to hearing in an orchestral oboe sound, a big, beautiful, soloistic oboe. So again, ooh embouchure, thinking support with the corners of your mouth, roll in the lips a little bit, downward position for the oboe. Enjoy making those first sounds.